I was halfway through the quarterly presentation when I saw her, sitting at the edge of the boardroom table like a ghost I'd never quite stopped seeing in my dreams, wearing the same smug little smile she used to flash when she thought she'd won an argument, and for a moment, my throat closed up like it used to when I'd beg her to stay, back when I still thought love was something you could fight for even when the other person had already walked away in their heart. "Mr. Carson. Do you want to continue?" The voice of our CFO snapped me out of it, but I didn't look away from her right away. I couldn't, not when her eyes were locked on mine like she knew exactly what kind of hell she'd dragged me through and wanted to see if I'd drown all over again. "Yeah," I muttered, clearing my throat, "yeah, I'm good." But I wasn't, not really, because how do you prepare for the moment your past walks into your present dressed in business attire and carrying a notepad, like she's here to take notes on the success she once told you'd never have? I remember the night she called me a loser like it was tattooed on the inside of my eyelids. I just put our son to bed, kissed his forehead like I always did, and walked into the kitchen to find her on her phone, half smirking at whatever message lit up her screen. "You ever gonna get a real job again?" she asked, not looking up. I blinked, confused. A real job? You know, something that actually pays well, instead of all this consulting crap you do from the couch. I felt my jaw tighten, because what she called consulting was me trying to build something from scratch, using the same skills that got me offers from Fortune 500 companies before I chose to be the guy who stayed home more, the guy who cooked, who went to parent-teacher nights, who sacrificed what he wanted for the sake of being present. "I told you," I said quietly, "I'm still building it out. It's not overnight success, it takes time." She finally looked up, and I'll never forget how cold her eyes were, like she wasn't talking to her husband, but some stranger who disappointed her by simply existing. "You're not building anything, Matt," she said, standing and dumping her wine in the sink. "You're hiding from the fact that you peaked at 30 and now you're just this. A washed-up has-been who reads self-help books and plays house like a retiree." I stared at her, not because of what she said, but because of how easily it came out, like she'd been holding it in for months, maybe years, rehearsing it in her head every time I packed our kids' lunch or made breakfast before our meetings. "You don't mean that," I whispered, already knowing she did. She shrugged, like she couldn't be bothered to lie anymore. "I married a man with ambition, with fire, someone who used to dream big. Now I live with a man who talks about one day like it's some kind of religion." I wanted to scream, to tell her that everything I gave up was for us, for our son, that I'd turned down job offers in cities she didn't want to move to, passed on promotions because she said she needed me close, but none of that mattered anymore, because in her eyes, I'd failed the one test that counted, becoming someone the world respected. That night she packed a bag, didn't cry, didn't yell, just left, like she was late for a flight she'd always planned on taking, and I sat there, in the quiet, with our son asleep upstairs and the sound of the front door clicking shut still echoing in my chest. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. I moved through the days like a ghost, trying to keep things normal for my boy, trying not to let the bitterness curdle into poison, but it did, slowly, in pieces. She filed for divorce 2 weeks later, said she wanted full custody, said I wasn't stable, said I was too wrapped up in my failed dreams to be a reliable parent, and I knew then that she wasn't just leaving, she was erasing me, rewriting the story of us into something that made her the survivor. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom, there's nowhere lower to go, and when you finally stop falling, you start seeing clearly again. I took every broken piece of myself and built something real, something sharp and focused. I said yes to the next job offer that came my way, then worked 60-hour weeks until I became the guy people went to when things were falling apart, and over time, my name started showing up in the right rooms again. I didn't date for a long time, didn't trust anyone, didn't even think about falling in love, because every time I did, I'd hear her voice in my head calling me a loser, like a curse I had to break by proving her wrong. And now, 5 years later, I'm sitting at the head of this boardroom table as CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech firms on the East Coast, about to close a deal with a marketing firm that could triple our reach. And she's here, sitting across from me, wearing a name tag that says Strategic Accounts Director, her last name different now, but her eyes still exactly the same. I look down at my notes, trying to focus, but my hands are trembling under the table, not from fear, from rage, from disbelief, from the sudden flood of memories I've spent years trying to drown. She doesn't speak during the rest of the meeting, just takes notes, nods occasionally, but I can feel her watching me like she's trying to figure out if I'm real or some version of the man she left behind that grew teeth and climbed his way back up. When the meeting ends, people start standing and shaking hands, and I feel the air change as she approaches me, slow, careful, like she's testing the ground before each step. "Matt," she says, like the name tastes strange on her tongue, "I didn't expect to see you here." I force a smile, but it doesn't reach my eyes. Well, life's full of surprises. She looks older, not in a bad way, just heavier somehow, like life didn't give her the version of happiness she thought she'd bought when she cashed me out. I've heard things, she says, glancing down. You've really done well for yourself. I nod. Took a while. There's a silence between us that stretches, thick with all the words we never said, and just when I think she might walk away, she says something I didn't see coming. I was wrong about you, she says softly. Back then, I didn't see what you were trying to do. I just thought you were giving up. I look at her, really look at her, and I realize something I never expected. I don't hate her, not anymore, because the man I am now doesn't need her approval, her apology, or her validation. But that doesn't mean I'll let her back in either. I didn't give up, I say, my voice low, calm, final. I just chose a different kind of strength. And I'm still choosing it. She nods once, and I can see the regret in her eyes, but it's too late now, because this story isn't about her anymore. It's about me, and what I became when she walked away. After she walked away from that boardroom, I just sat there for a moment longer, staring at the empty chair she'd left behind, wondering why her presence still felt like a bruise I'd just found again after thinking it had healed years ago. And maybe that's the thing no one tells you, that healing doesn't mean forgetting, it just means learning how to carry the weight without it crushing you every time it shifts. I didn't tell anyone what she said to me, not the apology, not the regret in her eyes, not the way my heart had thudded in my chest like it was trying to warn me, don't go back, don't open that door again, even if she knocks. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about it all day, if I didn't wonder what her life looked like now, if she had someone new, if she ever thought about what she gave up when she walked out that night without so much as hugging our son goodbye. I picked up my phone and opened the last picture I had of the three of us, taken the day we moved into the tiny house with the peeling porch and broken fence, back when I still believed in simple things like effort and loyalty, back when she used to call me her rock instead of dead weight. I used to blame myself, you know, I used to think maybe I really wasn't enough, maybe I didn't dream big enough, maybe love wasn't supposed to look like grocery lists and bedtime stories and balancing a checkbook. But now I know better. When I got home that night, my son was already at the kitchen table, legs stretched out, scrolling through something on his phone and pretending not to wait up for me, even though he always did. You're late, he muttered without looking up, but I could hear the smile tugging at the edge of his voice. Boardroom battle, I said, tossing my keys into the bowl by the door. We won, but barely. He finally looked up and grinned. You always win. Not always, I said, walking over to ruffle his hair, but I'm getting better at it. He didn't know what happened today, didn't know that I came face to face with the woman who left me gutted and gasping, didn't know that part of me still hurt in places I didn't like admitting out loud. He also didn't know that every single thing I'd built, every sleepless night, every strategic risk, every hard call, was for him. Homework done? I asked. He nodded. Finished an hour ago. Can I stay up? There's this game release. I raised an eyebrow. You know the rules, champ. But you can tell me about it in the morning. Deal. He sighed dramatically, like I'd just ruined his life, but then he grinned and grabbed his plate to head to the sink, and I stood there watching him, tall now, taller than I expected at 14, with my stubborn jaw and her sharp eyes, and I wondered again how she could ever walk away from him. Maybe I'll never understand that part. Later that night, I was in my study going through emails when I saw it, a message from her, subject line, thank you for today, no punctuation, just plain, like she didn't want to scare me off with anything emotional. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. Matt. I know I caught you off guard today, and I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted to say thank you for being civil. I wasn't sure how you'd react, and honestly, I wouldn't have blamed you if you'd ignored me completely. You've done incredible things. I mean that. Ray. That's what she went by now. Shortened her full name, Rachel, like it would shorten the past too. I read the message again, then closed the laptop without replying, because I knew where this kind of thing could lead, and I wasn't going back to a place where her words could undo me again. But the universe. It doesn't care what you're ready for, it just keeps throwing things at you until you stop flinching. The next week, she was back in our offices for a follow-up meeting, this time more poised, more professional, but her eyes still scanned the room for me the second she walked in, and I made sure to keep my distance, to stay focused on the pitch, the numbers, the future. But after the meeting ended, she caught me in the hallway, her heels clicking fast behind me until I had no choice but to stop. "Matt," she said, breathless, "can we talk for a second?" I turned slowly, keeping my voice neutral. "What about?" She looked around like she didn't want to be overheard, then leaned in just a little. "It's not about work. I've been thinking about things. About you. About our son." My jaw clenched at that last part. "Don't talk about him like you know him." Her eyes flickered with guilt. "I know I've been absent. And I know I don't have a right to ask for anything, but you're going to ask anyway," I cut in, my voice low, "because you always do. And back then, I always gave. My time. My support. My patience. I gave until there was nothing left of me but disappointment, Ray." She didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there taking it like she knew she deserved it, and maybe she did, but it didn't make me feel better. "I want to reconnect with him," she said finally. "I know it'll take time, and I know he might hate me, but—" "He doesn't hate you," I said, and I hated how tired my voice sounded. "He just stopped waiting for you to show up." That made her flinch, and for a second I saw the woman I used to know, the one who cried when he got his first fever, the one who used to leave notes in my lunch bag, the one who said forever and maybe even meant it for a while. "I want to try," she whispered, "if you'll let me." I stared at her, and all I could think was, where was this version of you when I needed backup at 3 a.m.? Where was this effort when I was scraping change for groceries and pretending it didn't kill me inside? "You don't need my permission," I said, "but don't come in and out of his life like a revolving door. If you want to try, really try, you do it on his terms, not yours. You earn his trust. Not mine." She nodded, tears in her eyes now, and I didn't know if they were real or just the regret finally catching up with her, but I didn't have the energy to sort it out. Later that night, I sat down with my son and told him everything, that his mother was back in town, that she wanted to talk, that I wouldn't force anything but thought he deserved to know. He stared at me for a long time, his face unreadable, then shrugged. "I don't care," he said, voice flat. "She made her choice." "She did," I said gently, "but people change. Sometimes. I just want you to be prepared either way." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and said something I'll never forget. "I don't need her to come back, Dad. You were always enough." And in that moment, I knew something deep in my bones. No matter how much she'd broken me, I had done one thing right. I had become the man I wished I had growing up. And I wasn't a loser. Not even close. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was angry or restless, but because for the first time in a long time, I was actually calm, like something had shifted in me, like I'd finally walked out of a burning house I'd been standing in for years without realizing the flames were even there. Her return, her apology, her tears, none of it could undo the years I spent rebuilding myself from the ground up, and strangely, I didn't feel the need to punish her or prove anything anymore, because the truth was, I'd already won the fight I never signed up for. But the next morning brought a new kind of weight, the kind that comes with decisions you can't take back, especially when they involve a kid who's been let down once already. Over breakfast, my son sat across from me eating cereal like it was just another Thursday, headphones in, eyes on his phone, like the world hadn't just tilted sideways the night before, and I wondered if he was really as unaffected as he pretended to be. "Hey," I said, tapping the table, "can we talk for a minute?" He pulled out one earbud, raised an eyebrow. "About Mom?" "Yeah," I said, exhaling slowly. "Look, I know you said you don't care, and maybe you don't right now, but I also know how much it hurt you when she left, even if you never said it out loud." He didn't answer, just pushed his spoon around in the bowl like he was trying to decide how much of himself to show me. "She wants to talk to you," I said, "only if you're open to it. I won't push either way. But I need you to understand something. If you decide to meet her, it doesn't mean you're betraying me. You don't have to pick sides. You never did." He looked up then, eyes sharper than any 14-year-old should be. "Why now?" I paused. "I don't know. Maybe she regrets it. Maybe she's lonely. Or maybe she finally realized what she walked away from." His jaw tightened, and for a second, I saw myself in him again, not just physically, but the way he carried hurt like armor, the way he hid disappointment behind sarcasm and silence. "Can I think about it?" he asked quietly. "Of course," I said, "take all the time you need." And he nodded, going back to his cereal, like the conversation never happened, but I knew it stayed with him, the way those moments always do. Later that day, I had a lunch meeting with the board, one of those fancy places where the water costs more than a tank of gas and everyone speaks in half smiles and metaphors, and I was halfway through a pitch when my phone buzzed under the table. I ignored it at first, but it buzzed again, and something in my gut told me to check it. When I finally looked, there were 3 missed calls and a text from Ray. "I need your help. Please. It's about him." I excused myself, barely remembering what I'd said to the board, and stepped outside to call her back, my heart already pounding because when it comes to your kid, every second of uncertainty feels like a free fall. She answered on the first ring, her voice shaky. "He came to see me." "What?" I asked, blinking. "He said he needed time." "I know, I didn't expect it either," she said quickly, "but he showed up at my hotel. I guess he found the address in my email on your laptop." I ran a hand over my face. "Yeah, that sounds like him." I didn't know what to say, she continued. "He was so guarded. Like he was testing me every second. And then, out of nowhere, he asked why I left." I closed my eyes, already wincing. "What did you say?" I told him the truth, she whispered, that I was selfish. That I thought I was missing out on something bigger. That I blamed you for my own fear. And then, he asked if I ever thought he wasn't worth it. Her voice cracked then, and I felt it in my chest like a punch. "I told him he was the best part of my life," she said, tears in her voice, "but I don't think he believed me." I leaned against the wall, staring out at the traffic below, trying to process everything. "Where is he now?" "He left," she said, didn't say a word, just stood up and walked out. "Okay," I said, already moving toward the street to grab a cab, "I'll find him." It took me 2 hours, 2 agonizing, anxious hours, of calling, driving, texting his friends, checking the park, the basketball court, even the diner where we used to go on weekends, before I found him sitting on the swings at the old playground behind the elementary school, headphones in, eyes on the sky like he was looking for answers in the clouds. I didn't say anything at first, just sat on the swing next to him, letting the silence settle between us the way it used to when he was little and overwhelmed, back when a quiet presence meant more than any lecture ever could. After a few minutes, he spoke, voice flat. "She cried." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I figured." "She said I was the best thing she ever had," he added, "but if that's true, why'd she leave?" I swallowed hard. I've asked myself the same question, more times than I can count. And the only answer I've come up with is, some people don't know how to hold on to good things when they're scared they don't deserve them. He didn't respond, just let his foot drag through the dirt in slow circles. "I don't need her back," he said finally, but it still hurt. Hearing her say that stuff, like she just figured it out now. "I know," I said gently, "and it's okay to feel that. You don't have to be okay with everything just because you're strong." He looked at me then, and something in his expression softened. "I'm glad I went. Even if it sucked. I think I needed to see for myself." "That's brave," I said, reaching over to squeeze his shoulder. "I'm proud of you." He smiled, small and tired. "Can we go home?" "Yeah," I said, standing up, "let's go home." That night, while he slept peacefully in his room, I found myself staring at my phone again, another message from Ray waiting unread in my inbox. "Thank you for finding him. And for raising him into someone I'm lucky just to know. I won't try to take anything from you, Matt. I just hope one day he can forgive me. Even if it's only a little." I didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because I finally understood something important. Some wounds aren't meant to be fixed, just acknowledged. And the more I looked around at this life I'd built, the quiet strength of our home, the honesty between me and my son, the career I thought I had lost but now owned, the more I realized I didn't need closure from her. Because the story wasn't about her anymore. It was about what came after. It was about surviving the wreckage and still daring to build something worth living in. And I had. Maybe for the first time in my life. I truly had. A week passed without another message from Ray, and I didn't expect one, not really, because deep down I think we both understood that whatever thread still connected us had already frayed past repair, and that was okay. Not everything broken needs to be fixed, some things just need to be left in the past so they stop bleeding into the future. But just when I thought life was settling into its new rhythm, work, home, fatherhood, focus, I got an email that stopped me mid-sentence in a meeting, one of those moments that yanks you out of your body and leaves you hovering just outside yourself, watching it all from a distance. It was from our company's senior partner, forwarded to me with the subject line, client meeting confirmed, Monday 10 a.m. Please review background notes. I clicked it, scanning the briefing packet attached, some marketing firm out of Chicago, new tech investment, partnership potential, lots of money involved, and then I saw the name at the bottom of the email thread. Ray Tannen, Chief Brand Strategist, Brenton and Gray. I stared at it for a long time, like maybe if I blinked enough it would change into something else, but it didn't, and when the room's voices came back into focus, I realized someone had asked me a question I hadn't heard at all. Sorry, I muttered, forcing a breath, can you repeat that? They did, and I answered, I think, but my mind was miles away, already racing ahead to Monday, already imagining the moment she'd walk into that room, clipboard in hand, smile practiced, pretending this was just business like any other. But it wouldn't be, not for me. And certainly not for her. Monday came faster than I expected, like it had been waiting just around the corner all along, and I don't know what I thought would happen exactly, maybe that she'd cancel, or send someone else, or that fate would intervene and make the whole thing vanish, but none of that happened. At 9:58 a.m., I stood outside the glass doors of the conference room, gripping my notes, my pulse steady but my stomach coiled, and at 10:01, I saw her step out of the elevator down the hall. She didn't notice me at first, too busy adjusting her blazer, smoothing her hair, still the same deep brown, still tucked behind her left ear when she was nervous, and when our eyes finally met, I saw it, that half-second of shock, quickly buried beneath a professional smile. Matt, she said, walking toward me with a practiced calm, wasn't expecting you to be the lead on this. I nodded, offering a measured smile of my own, likewise. We shook hands, hers cool, firm, detached, and I held the door open for her as we stepped into the meeting room, surrounded by glass walls and business jargon and people who had no idea there was history between us so thick it nearly altered the air in the room. The meeting started like any other, introductions, slideshows, data points, but I could feel her eyes flick toward me now and then, searching for something in my expression, maybe regret, maybe bitterness, maybe something she could still reach. She found none of it. Because I wasn't the man she left behind anymore. Halfway through the presentation, she stood and walked toward the whiteboard, sketching out a brand strategy that was honestly impressive, clear, articulate, even bold, and for a moment, I forgot everything and simply listened, surprised by the sharpness she'd developed. She was good, I'd give her that. But when the meeting finally wrapped and the clients left to catch their flights, we were the last two in the room, gathering papers in silence until she finally spoke. Can we talk? She asked quietly, privately. I hesitated, then nodded, yeah. We stepped out onto the terrace, quiet, open, with a view of the city stretching wide beneath a cloudless sky, and she crossed her arms, leaning against the railing, eyes avoiding mine at first. I didn't know this was your firm, she said, finally looking up. I didn't even realize until I saw your name in the brief the night before the flight. And you still came, I said, not accusing, just stating a fact. She nodded, because I needed to. I needed to see you, in this version of your life. I stayed silent, waiting. You look different, she said, and when I raised an eyebrow, she clarified, not just the suit. You carry yourself differently now. Like someone who knows what he's worth. That's because I do, I said, voice steady. It took a while, but I figured it out. Not because of what I do or how much I earn, but because of who I am when no one's watching. She swallowed hard, looking down. I'm glad you found that. You didn't think I would, I said, not bitter, just honest. No, she admitted, I didn't. When I left, I thought I was leaving behind someone who was stuck. Someone who was afraid to change. And maybe I was, I said, back then. But you were wrong about why. I wasn't afraid. I chose a different life because I believed in what we were building, a family, a home, something solid. You mistook commitment for fear. She flinched a little, as if the truth still had weight after all this time. I've thought about that day 1,000 times, she said softly, the way I said it, the things I called you. It wasn't fair. You didn't deserve it. No, I agreed, I didn't. We stood there in the silence, the city buzzing beneath us like a heartbeat, and for the first time in years, I saw her not as my ex-wife, or the woman who broke me, but just a person, flawed, aging, tired in the corners of her eyes like me, and I felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness. But release. Is he okay? She asked suddenly, her voice catching, our son. I know he visited me, but he hasn't replied to my texts. I don't want to push him. He's okay, I said, still processing. You hit a nerve that's gonna take time to heal, if it heals at all. She nodded slowly, wiping at the corner of her eye. I deserve that. I didn't argue. Instead, I looked out at the skyline, letting the moment stretch, and then I turned to her. You know what the hardest part was? I asked. It wasn't the loneliness, or the judgment, or rebuilding everything from scratch. It was watching you walk away from something real because you thought you were trading up, and realizing you didn't even look back. She covered her mouth, eyes brimming. I did look back. I just didn't have the courage to stop. I nodded once, feeling the final click of something locking into place inside me. Well, I said, straightening my jacket, you can look all you want now. But I'm not where you left me anymore. And I walked away, not because I was angry, not to make a point, but because I had finally said what needed to be said. And for the first time in years, I meant every word. I wish I could say that after walking away from Ray on the terrace, I felt a perfect sense of closure, like I'd put down the final stone in a long, painful journey and could finally move forward in peace, but real life doesn't offer clean endings like that, not when love, disappointment, and shared history are tangled so deep you can still feel the echoes in your chest when the room gets quiet. What I felt, more than anything, was a strange stillness, like something inside me had gone silent for the first time in years, not dead, just, finally at rest. I didn't tell anyone about the meeting, not even my son, not because I was hiding it, but because some moments are too personal to narrate out loud, some confrontations are meant to live only in your memory, private and sacred and unrepeatable. But the universe doesn't always leave things at peace just because you ask it to. About 2 weeks later, I got a call from my assistant, Lisa, saying we'd been invited to a follow-up mixer hosted by Brenton and Gray, one of those high-end networking events where drinks flow freely, and so does corporate ambition, and I knew before she even finished her sentence that Ray would be there. I almost declined, almost passed it off to someone else, but something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe pride, made me say yes. The event was held in one of those rooftop lounges where everything smells like money and effort, with sweeping city views and sleek furniture that looks too expensive to actually sit on, and as I stepped inside, wearing my best suit and my calmest expression, I scanned the room automatically and saw her by the bar. She hadn't seen me yet, laughing lightly at something a colleague said, a glass of white wine in hand, and I stood there for a moment, watching her from across the room, not as a man watching the woman who left him, but as someone who'd survived the fire and could finally look back at the ashes without choking. Eventually, she noticed me, and our eyes met again, this time without tension, without surprise, just two people standing on opposite shores of a shared past. She walked over slowly, her smile uncertain. "I didn't think you'd come," she said. "Neither did I replied, and we both laughed, not bitterly, but genuinely, like people who'd aged enough to let go of the sharpest parts. "I'm glad you did," she said, then looked away briefly before adding, "I was thinking about what you said, on the terrace." I waited. "You were right," she continued, "I confused safety with stagnation. And I blamed you for the life we built because I didn't know how to sit with my own dissatisfaction. That's something I had to learn too," I said, "that you can love someone and still feel trapped. That it's not always someone's fault. But it is someone's responsibility to speak up before it turns into resentment." She nodded slowly. "I never told you this, but, after I left, it wasn't what I imagined. I kept thinking success would make everything feel worth it, but the higher I climbed, the lonelier it got. I missed something real, something grounded. And by the time I realized it, I was too proud to turn around." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, and she looked down, blinking fast. "Do you miss me?" she asked suddenly, and though her tone was quiet, the question landed with weight. I took a deep breath, then said honestly, "I miss the version of us that believed we were in it for the long haul. I miss who we were in the early mornings and late nights when we didn't care about timelines or titles. But I don't miss what it became." She looked like she wanted to say more, but a voice called her name across the room, her colleague, beckoning her toward another group, and she smiled apologetically. "Can we talk again?" "Just, not here." I hesitated, then nodded, "All right. One last time." We met a few days later at a quiet coffee shop far from downtown, the kind of place where nobody wore suits and the coffee came in mismatched mugs, and I could tell by the way Ray dressed down, jeans and a sweater instead of business armor, that she wanted to talk like people, not professionals. She started slowly, telling me about her life after the divorce, the long nights, the therapy sessions she'd resisted, the rebound relationship that fizzled out because she kept comparing him to someone else, me, I realized, even though she didn't say it. I've been carrying guilt like it was part of me, she admitted, but I didn't know how to lay it down until I saw you again. Seeing you now, steady, fulfilled, it made me realize I didn't ruin you, even if I hurt you. You didn't ruin me, I said, you forced me to face everything I'd been avoiding. And eventually, I stopped trying to prove something to the world and just started proving it to myself. She smiled faintly, tears in her eyes. I'm proud of you, Matt. Truly. I just wish I hadn't had to lose you to see it. I nodded, letting the silence between us fill with the things we'd never said, the apologies too late, the understanding too early, and I knew then that this was our real ending. Not with slammed doors or shouted insults, but with truth and peace. Before we parted, she reached across the table and took my hand briefly, warm and tentative. Maybe in another life, she whispered. I squeezed her fingers gently, but not this one. And that was it. No grand gesture. No rekindling flame. Just two people learning how to finally let go of the story they kept rewriting in their heads. That night, I sat on my balcony, the city buzzing below, and I thought about all the versions of myself I'd lived through, the dreamer, the husband, the provider, the broken man, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I owed any of them an explanation. I'd come full circle. And even if she'd been part of my greatest pain, she'd also been part of my becoming. And maybe that's what healing really is, not erasing the past, but learning how to carry it with grace. It had been a few weeks since that final conversation with Ray, and I felt lighter in ways I didn't fully understand until the silence between us became comfortable instead of haunted, like I could finally breathe in my own life without the weight of her shadow pressing against every moment. Work was steady, my name was getting more attention in industry circles, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving, I was building something, piece by piece, from the ground up, not to impress anyone, not to chase validation, but because it mattered to me, because it made me proud. But then something happened that knocked the wind out of all that quiet progress, a reminder that even when you've made peace with your past, the people around you might still be trying to climb out of theirs. It started with a phone call from my son's school. I remember the way the secretary's voice tightened around every word, polite but clearly rehearsed. There was an incident, we'd like you to come in and speak with the counselor, nothing dangerous, but concerning. I was there within the hour, heart in my throat the whole drive, my mind leaping to every worst-case scenario a parent can imagine, drugs, fighting, suspension, only to be met by a calm, soft-spoken school counselor who offered me tea before I even sat down. I want to start by saying your son is incredibly bright, she began, folding her hands over a yellow notepad. He's respectful, thoughtful, but he's also clearly struggling with some unresolved emotions. I looked at her, confused and trying not to sound defensive. What do you mean, unresolved? She took a breath, then continued. He turned in a writing assignment that raised some flags. It was a personal essay, the prompt was about someone who let him down. Most kids wrote about a friend, or a teacher, but he wrote about his mother. I closed my eyes for a moment, a dull ache blooming behind them. What did he say? She hesitated, then opened a folder and passed it to me, and as I read the words my son had poured onto that page, something inside me fractured in slow motion. She promised she'd always be there, but she left anyway. She said Dad was the problem, but he never left. He's the one who stayed when I had nightmares, when I was sick, when everything hurt. She only texts me now to ask if I'm mad, but I don't even know how to answer that. I'm not mad. I'm just done. I read the words over and over, not because I didn't understand them, but because each sentence felt like it carried all the weight I thought I'd been shielding him from, and suddenly I realized how wrong I'd been to assume my quiet strength had been enough. He hasn't spoken to her in over a month, I said quietly. She reached out, but he stopped replying. The counselor nodded. Children are more perceptive than we give them credit for. They absorb tension, abandonment, guilt, even if we try to protect them from it. Is he okay? I asked, my voice rougher than I expected. He's holding a lot in, she said gently, but he trusts you. That much is clear. And right now, that's a gift. If I may suggest something, don't force him to talk about her, but don't avoid it either. Let him lead. And just be available. I nodded, unable to say much else, and after thanking her, I went to sign him out early, not because he needed it but because I needed to see him, to hear his voice and remember that even when the world cracked beneath our feet, we still had each other. He didn't say much on the ride home, just looked out the window with his headphones in, until we pulled into the driveway and I turned off the engine but didn't open the door. "You want to talk about it?" I asked gently. He shrugged, "Not really." "That's okay," I said, "I just wanted you to know I read what you wrote. And I'm here. Whenever you're ready." He looked at me then, his eyes tired in a way that broke my heart, and for a second I thought he was going to change the subject like he usually did, but instead, he said, "Why didn't she fight harder?" The question hit me like a punch, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I'd asked myself the same thing for years. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe she thought walking away would hurt less than trying and failing again. Maybe she convinced herself we'd both be better off. But that doesn't mean she didn't love you. She didn't know how to stay." He looked down at his hands, fidgeting with the sleeves of his hoodie. I keep thinking it was my fault. I reached over and gently placed my hand over his. "Hey. Look at me. None of this was ever your fault. Grown-ups mess up. Sometimes really badly. But you didn't do anything wrong. You were the one thing I never questioned through all of it." His eyes filled, but he blinked the tears away quickly, nodding without speaking, and in that moment, I saw just how much of my own journey he'd been carrying without realizing it, how much of my silence had become his silence, how my healing had to include his. That night, I sat alone in the living room after he went to bed, staring at the photo we still had on the bookshelf, the three of us on his 5th birthday, Ray in the middle, arms wrapped around us both like the world made sense back then, and I knew I had to do something. Not for me. Not for her. But for him. So I called her. It rang 4 times before she answered, her voice sleepy and confused. "Matt. Is everything okay?" "I'm not calling for me," I said, "I'm calling for our son." She went quiet. "He's not okay," I said, keeping my voice steady. "He's hurt, and he's angry, and he doesn't know what to do with any of it. I've tried to be everything he needs, but I can't be both parents. He needs to hear something real from you." She inhaled sharply, like I'd pulled a thread she was barely holding onto. "I don't know what to say. What if I make it worse?" "Then be honest," I said, "own what you did. Apologize, not with excuses, not with justifications, but from your heart. He doesn't need you to be perfect. He just needs you to stop pretending everything's fine." There was silence on the other end, then a soft, "Okay. I'll try." And for the first time, I believed her. She didn't call him right away, and I didn't push, because some apologies take time to gather the courage for, and even more time to deliver the right way. But 4 days later, I walked into the living room and found my son sitting on the couch, phone in hand, expression unreadable, and for a second I thought something was wrong, until he looked up at me and said quietly, "She called." I sat down next to him without a word, waiting, letting him take the lead, and after a long pause, he finally spoke again. "She cried, a lot. Said she was sorry. That she didn't know how badly she hurt me, or you, until she couldn't sleep without thinking about it." He stared down at his hands, turning the phone over slowly. "She said she left because she felt like she was disappearing, and she thought she had to choose between being a person and being a mom, but that she sees now she didn't choose at all, she just ran." I nodded, quietly taking that in. "And how did that feel? Hearing it?" He shrugged at first, but then said, "Weird. Part of me wanted to yell. But another part of me felt sorry for her." That's when I knew he was growing up, not just in years, but in spirit, because the moment you start feeling empathy for the people who broke your heart, that's when healing begins, not because it makes their actions okay, but because it frees you from carrying their weight. She asked if I wanted to see her sometime, he added after a moment. I said maybe. "Not yet. But maybe." I smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You get to decide that. It's your timeline, not hers. And whatever you choose, I'm with you." He leaned against me then, like he used to when he was little and the world felt too big, and for the first time in years, I felt like maybe we were both going to be okay, not perfect, not untouched, but okay in a way that meant we'd found solid ground again. That weekend, we did something we hadn't done in a long time, just the two of us, no distractions, no work calls, no leftovers eaten in silence. We packed a bag, got in the car, and drove to the lake where we used to go when he was younger, before everything got complicated. It wasn't fancy, just a rented cabin, a beat-up canoe, and a couple of cold sandwiches, but it was real, and sometimes real is all you need. We sat by the water at sunset, the orange light dancing on the surface like it had secrets to keep, and he turned to me suddenly and said, "You know what I think about a lot." "What?" "That night you made waffles for dinner when we ran out of groceries, and you said it was breakfast for dinner night, so I wouldn't feel bad." I laughed, surprised. That was years ago. "I know," he said, "but I remember it. It's one of my favorite memories. You made everything feel okay, even when it wasn't." I didn't say anything right away because I was too busy swallowing the lump in my throat, but after a moment, I said, "You gave me a reason to keep going when I didn't know how." "I never told you that." "But you did." We sat there until the stars started coming out, the silence between us filled not with distance, but with comfort, the way only shared survival can feel when you know you've both come through something heavy and lived to tell about it. And in that moment, I realized something that had eluded me for years. I'd spent so long trying to prove that I wasn't a failure, to Ray, to the world, to myself, that I never stopped to recognize that the life I'd built after losing everything wasn't a consolation prize, it was the real win. Not because of money, or status, or recognition. But because I'd learned how to stand again. How to love without bitterness. How to show up, every single day, for someone who depended on me without asking for proof that I was enough. When we got back from the trip, I found an email waiting for me in my inbox, from Ray. It was simple, just a few lines. "Matt. Thank you for everything, for holding our son when I couldn't, for forgiving me in ways I didn't deserve, and for being the father I wish I had growing up. I'll never ask you to forget, but I hope, in time, we can both look back without pain. Sincerely. Ray." I stared at the words for a long time, not because I didn't believe them, but because I finally did. And I realized I didn't need anything else from her, not more explanations, not more regret. Because I'd already found what I was really looking for. Closure. Not the kind that slams doors and walks away. But the kind that says, I lived through this, I learned from it, and I'm still here. Stronger. Wiser. And still capable of love. A few months later, I was invited to speak at a major industry event, keynote speaker, no less, and I stood on that stage, looking out at the faces of people who respected me not for my title, but for my story, and I started with this. There was a time in my life when I thought success meant being seen. That if I wasn't applauded, I hadn't made it. But the truth is, real success is quieter. It's in the moments no one sees, staying up late with a sick kid, rebuilding a life from the floor up, learning how to forgive yourself for breaking. I didn't get here because everything went right. I got here because everything went wrong, and I kept going anyway. The room was quiet in the best way, the kind of quiet that tells you people aren't just listening, they're feeling it. And as I walked off the stage, a young man came up to me and said, "Thank you." That felt like my life. I thought I was the only one. I smiled, shook his hand, and said, "You're never the only one. You just haven't told your story yet." Now, when I look back on everything, the broken dreams, the late-night arguments, the slammed doors and silent mornings, I don't feel bitterness anymore. I feel grateful. Because if Ray hadn't walked away, I never would have discovered the man I was always capable of being. And if I hadn't lost everything, I never would have learned how to truly value what matters most. Not recognition. Not revenge. But the quiet strength of showing up. Every single day. Especially when it's hard. Especially when it hurts. Because in the end, that's what makes a life worth living.